Reading to you from my autobiography entitled I Count My Life by Sabbaths, Part 2, My Childhood, Chapter 8, Street Meetings and Tent Revivals. My father was one of a series of men sent by my uncle to oversee the small group that was now gathering in Greenwood. Other men, similar to Elvis Fleming and Henry Gilley and others, came, but it was my father who stuck and served for 7 years before being installed permanently as pastor. Services were initially held in the front living room of the home of James and Virginia Guffey on Washington Street in Greenwood. It was located just behind Dr. Clore's Mineral Feed Company. The pulpit was a television covered by a sheet. To gain more converts, this group resorted to street meetings. I was 4 years old, and it was my job to hold the U.S. flag during the street meetings my father was holding. These were on Greenwood's Main Street in the parking lot just across from Yeoman's drugstore. As a teenager, I would learn about the wonderful soda fountain they had, but in the street meetings, my mom would play the accordion and my father would try to preach as local teens in their long, low, winged chariots drove by, laying on their horns, trying to drown out his words. If it rained during the meeting, we would move east on Main Street to the awning in front of Browning's shoe store across from Dieter's Market. In the early 1950s, we went from street meetings to tent revivals. I still have home movies of Chuck Cunningham, James Guffey, Allen Centers, and my dad trying to raise a tent on the property owned by the church where Sanjo Steel now sits. My father had purchased the property next to the cemetery, believing that it was an ideal location for a church. Greenwood's Building and Planning Commissions, however, never permitted this, and I recall royal fights by church officials that made the newspapers. I still possess copies of those clippings. I was present at one of these particularly tense meetings. People were emphatically speaking their minds, including the Methodist pastor. It was his opinion that Greenwood had enough churches, and he said if we wanted to stay in Greenwood, we should just go to the other side of the tracks. As a little boy, I could feel the tension, and I felt threatened. What I did next created an awkward moment for my dad. He wore a pen holder on his belt, where he not only kept pens to write with, but a single-shot .38 caliber tear gas pen gun. I tugged on the sleeve of the Methodist preacher when he sat down and pulled back my dad's suit coat, revealing the pen gun, and said, "You better leave my dad alone if you know what's good for you." My dad did not appreciate that. As it turned out, it was fortunate that the church wasn't permitted to build on that site. Not able to develop the property, the church was forced to sell it, and Southwood Machinery, located near Highway 31 and Stop 11 Road, stepped in and bought it. They were purveyors of heavy equipment such as bulldozer excavators and other similar heavy machinery. When they moved their equipment in, they learned there was a large emplacement of quicksand on the east end of the property. They almost lost an expensive bulldozer as it sank deeper and deeper into the muck. So much money had to be spent to bring in solid material such as large boulders and rocks that Southwood went bankrupt trying to solve the problem. An old converted railroader from Cincinnati, Brother McMillan, also called him Brother Mac, came and preached revivals under the tent. His testimony was that he had opposed his wife's conversion to Pentecostalism. He would beat her in an attempt to keep her from going to a Pentecostal church. Eventually, God got a hold of his heart. He repented of his sins and began to preach the gospel. Brother Mac was a fiery preacher who loved to wave a white handkerchief while he preached. The pews were long 2x12s bolted into metal frames, and there was truly a sawdust trail. For whatever reason, I seem to recall a lot of mosquito bites on my legs during this time. It was an exciting time, though, and the crowds came to listen, including one lady who drove a long white Cadillac. She would sit on the hood of her car and watch the people fall out. She became convinced that Brother Mac caused this by waving his white handkerchief. Surely he had knockout drops in it. One night it started pouring down rain while she was watching, so she slipped off the hood of her car and crept under the tent flap. Unbeknownst to her, just above her head was a needle-sized hole in the tent fabric. Perhaps it was blocked by something up to that split second, but when Brother Mac began to wave his hanky once again, a raindrop fell on her forehead. She started screaming, "I knew it! I knew it! I knew it!" But she never fell out. Be sure to tune in for the next episode.